Hello my friends, welcome back. So today we're going to be doing something totally different from what we normally do on the channel. Today we are going to be rebuilding my lab by reinstalling Nutanix Community Edition on all the servers that I have. And I'm going to be recording every single step of the process. Now the reason why I wanted to do that is because I have friends, colleagues asking me, with all of these demos that I do, where do I normally host all of these labs, right? So I thought it'd be a good time to actually share the process of rebuilding the lab. I have a couple of servers here, 7 in total, and these are decommissioned servers that I have acquired or has been donated to me, except for the top GPU server, which is something that I purchased myself. At the very bottom, we have got a couple of Lenovo servers, and these Lenovo servers are used to create a management cluster. Now, this management cluster isn't exactly super beefy, but it provides a ton of storage. And this is where I deploy things like my Prism Central, my Nutanix objects, Nutanix file servers, as well as a Harbor registry that allows me to centrally store container images. So it provides about 40 terabytes of storage, which I think is pretty sufficient for me right now. Then moving on, we have got a non-GPU workload cluster. So this is where I host all my Kubernetes clusters, as well as clusters that do not, or as well as servers that do not require any form of GPU compute. And this is where I host them. So I've got about 1.5 terabytes of RAM in total, not including high availability, right? And about 40 cores per server. So I've got about 112 core, 120 cores for use to host my non-GPU workloads. And lastly, we've got the big boy, right? So this is a GPU workload cluster. It's got about 64 cores of CPU, 1 terabyte of RAM, a small little bit of storage, but the key highlight here is the GPUs, right? And this is where I typically run my AI demos. I deploy my Kubernetes clusters with GPU requirements on. So today what we are going to be doing is we are going to be reinstalling Nutanix Community Edition. Now, as you can see, I already have all the USB flash drives connected to the server itself, right? And in order for me to reload this USB sticks with the latest versions of Nutanix Community Edition, I would have to make my way down to the data center, right? But that is very cumbersome and troublesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remotely flash these flash drives with the latest version of Nutanix Community Edition. So where can we first download Nutanix Community Edition? We can actually head over to next.nutanix.com, go over into the community tab, click on it, and you will see this Nutanix Community Edition section over here, and just click on the discussion forums. And this will bring you to the Nutanix Community Edition discussion forum, whereby you will see a tile over here which you can download Community Edition from. So click on that, and you will get to see a link whereby you can download Nutanix Community Edition. So there are many ways to load your USB flash drive with Nutanix Community Edition. If you are using Windows, you can use Rufus, but you got to use Rufus version 3.2.3.21. If you're using Mac OS, you can use something like Etcher or Unetbootin. So for me, I'm going to be downloading this directly on my servers itself because, as you saw earlier, my flash drives are already connected to it. So how I'll do that is by launching a terminal and doing an SSH session to one of my servers. And as you can see, this is a Nutanix AHV server, right? And this is because my servers are already pre-installed with Nutanix AHV. But what I'm going to be doing is, because my USB flash drives are already connected to it, I'm just going to be downloading the ISO directly from here. So I can first find a location which have sufficient space. So I'll just df-h, and we can see that varlog seems to have sufficient space, right? So that we have got 82 gigabytes of storage left. So the next step would be to cd into that location, and we can copy the URL of this installer ISO and doing a wget. So this will take some time. So as we can see, the download has completed. So the first step that we need to do is to identify the correct USB flash drive that is connected into the system. So for those who are intending to follow along, I will leave the commands in the description of the video. So as you can see, it's SDF, and it's a SanDisk 3.2 Gen 1 flash drive. So we can export an environment variable. Then we can make sure that this USB device is not mounted anywhere, and we can wipe the file system of the flash drive. And lastly, we will zero out the first 100 megabytes to ensure that we get a clean drive. Then the next step is to create a FAT32 file system and prepare a couple of mount points. Okay. Lastly, what we will do is we are going to be mounting the ISO. So it's /var/log Phoenix export, and we'll add in some parentheses. Then what we can do is we can mount the ISO as well as the USB flash drive. So next, what we want to do is to ensure that the flash drive is actually empty, which it is. And then what we can do is we can start to copy over all the contents of the ISO into the USB. So we can see that the USB flash drive has been fully populated with the contents of the ISO. The last step that we need to do is to unmount the USB and the ISO, and then now we can start the installation of Community Edition on the servers. So I've already done this step on all the servers with the flash drive attached. I'll see you in the next section. So in this section, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be installing Community Edition on the 3 Lenovo servers that I have. As you can see, I've already launched for the 3 servers, and I've also got the console open and already booted into the first one-time boot device manager. So for the 3 individual servers, I'm just going to be selecting the USB flash drive that I have attached to the server for all the 3 servers and wait for it to boot into the Community Edition installer. So it's booting into the Community Edition installer right now. So let's give it a moment, wait for it to get booted. The Community Edition installer has successfully booted up. Now let's select the drives. As you can see, we have got 2 main SSDs, right? 960 gig SSDs. These are enterprise SSDs, so they survive a lot more wear and tear. And we've got a Samsung 870, which is consumer grade, so I'm putting them as drives. So I'm just going to specify for the hypervisor, I'm going to be using the ThinkSystem optimized boot drive. So I'm just going to specify press H for hypervisor boot. For CVM, I'm just going to press C for CVM and D for data drives. Right? And I'm going to leave the USB flash drive alone. Then I can just key in the IP addresses of my host, CVM, and subnet mask and gateway. Then we can head on to the next page and accept the ULA. And this will kick off the installation. Then we can do it for the next node as well. CVM, data, and hypervisor. And while we're waiting for the ULA to load, we'll just work on the third node. So the installation is running on all 3. We'll come back when the installation has completed. So our first server has completed the installation of Community Edition. It's asking us to reboot. Let's take a look at the second server. Still installing. Third server still installing. Right, so we can go ahead and reboot the first server first because it still has some initialization steps after its first boot. Second server is done as well, so it took about 13-15 minutes. And let's take a look at our third server. Okay, so the server is completed as well. Let's reboot all of the nodes. So it will go ahead and perform its first boot process whereby it configures its internal networking and all of the good stuff. So we'll come back and reconfigure the controller virtual machines to use a pass-through host bus adapter to improve performance for Nutanix Community Edition. I'll see you in the next section. Alright, we see that the first boot process has completed, and we can see that the host login, which was originally localhost, has now changed over into the host name of the actual node itself, right? So we can see that it's the same for all 3 of the different nodes. This typically takes about 10-15 minutes. I would suggest to leave it resting for 10-15 minutes because we do not want to mess anything up by trying to jump the process, right? So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be configuring this thing called the storage controller pass-through. So we are going to be passing through the host bus adapter directly to the controller VM itself. And this is a great technical blog that was written by Chris Hall, one of my colleagues in Nutanix. And this essentially allows us to extract the maximum amount of performance from Community Edition itself. So what happens in Community Edition is that, as we can see, there's a difference over in the storage I/O, right? What happens is that when the virtual machine tries to write data, it typically has to write it through the hypervisor to the controller virtual machine. The controller virtual machine then speaks to the SCSI controller, which is virtualized by the hypervisor itself. So we've got this additional virtualization layer over here. In the enterprise version of OS, what happens is that the SCSI controller is passed through directly to the controller VM itself. This allows for lower latency and eliminates the need for the hypervisor to virtualize the storage controller. When Chris did a benchmark of changing from the virtualized storage controller over into the pass-through, he got about 10 to 20% depending on the type of benchmark. So that's pretty cool, and because this is going to be our management cluster, whereby there is going to be Nutanix files, a registry, Nutanix objects, so it's going to be pretty I/O intensive. So we want to extract the maximum amount of performance from it. So he details all the steps in the blog. So what we can do is we can just follow along. In order to follow along, you need to ensure that your hypervisor is installed on a separate storage controller. So if you have got only one single storage controller that connects to your data drives as well as your hypervisor boot drive, this is not going to work. You need to ensure that you have got a separate controller that is connected for your boot drives. So in my notes, I have all of those, and my hypervisor is booting from a boot optimized storage card. Okay, first thing that we need to do is we need to identify our storage controllers. So let's SSH into our nodes. So SSH. And the next step is to LSPCI. LSPCI, we can grab for SCSI. And we see that we have got a single SCSI attached controller, right? So it's a Broadcom chip, LSI, blah, blah, blah. Then what we can do is we can identify it in a slightly deeper. LSPCI. Right. So it looks the same as what Chris has on his blog. And we want to look for the node dev list. So let's copy this and scroll up, and we can see that we've got all the individual drives. Okay, so it's identifying as PCI 000 58000. Okay, so it's identified as this, and this is what we have on our node. So if we log into our CVM, and for those who do not know, the CVM is hosted on the same node, and it can be directly connected from the local node itself. So 192.168.5 is an internal bridge that connects between the CVM and the host. Right. And if we look at LSPCI, we see that we have got indeed a virtualized storage controller. So we now have got all of this necessary information. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to shut down the CVM. So we see that CVM is running. So that's vir sh shutdown the CVM. Wait for you to get shut down. Great. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the vir sh node dev detach PCI with the information that we got from the tree earlier, right? So this is the one that we want to use. Now, before you do this, make sure that you are using a separate controller for your hypervisor boot. If you're not, you're going to see some weird issues happening on the AHV host itself, right? Like you cannot save the files, you cannot save configurations, and that is because we have detached the controller that is basically running the hypervisor from the nodes itself, so it's no longer being able to write to its local file system. Okay, so we've detached the host bus adapter, and what we need to do is we need to make a backup of the configurations. So if we run this command and we ls a particular directory, we see that the CVM config backup. Great. So the next step is the slightly more tedious one, right? Because I have a lot of drives, but let's cvm config.json, and we see that we've got all of this configurations that determines the configuration of a CVM. So what we are really interested in is this whole area, right? All the way down to here. Okay, so we will be changing all of this to point directly to the PCI adapter. So let's copy some information that we need. We will need this info that we got just to confirm So we'll need this info and we need to append 0000. Okay, so let's go ahead and try to edit it. Scroll down. We're going to be deleting a couple of lines. As you can see, we don't need things like vendor, product, serial, WWN, etc. So we're just going to be removing all of that. Make sure you keep the original UUID, right? We delete vendor, product, serial, WWN. We need to remove dev path as well. So there is an opening bracket here. So we need to delete all the way down to here. Okay. Then edit. Edit in address. If you open a bracket, make sure that you close it. And we need to specify PCI. So append 0000 colon PCI ID bus. And to make things simple, I think what we can do is, so we need to ensure that there's a sufficient amount of brackets, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's good. So let's go ahead and do the rest as well. So we can just copy all of this and edit the rest. So don't need this. Paste it in. Indentation is important. Maybe, I'm not sure. Right, so we've changed all the configurations of the drives. And seems like it's good. We can change the CVM memory to 32 gigs because I have got sufficient memory in my cluster. So let's see how much is 32 times 1024, 37,268. All right. So the next step is to recreate the CVM. So sh install, shut off, that's undefined CVM. And we can recreate it by using this command, right? So as an inbuilt AHV service to recreate the CVM using a modified template. Okay, after we restart the AHV define CM service, we can list again and we can see that the CVM is running. Okay, so how do we then know that it's actually working? So let's wait for the CVM to boot up. We can ping to 168.5.2 and wait for the CVM to come online. So we see there's a reply from the CVM, so that's a good sign. So we can SSH into the CVM itself and do a LSPCI. And we can see the SCSI controller is indeed being passed through over into the CVM itself. Great. So you can see the details. The SCSI controller, it looks good. So we're going to be doing this on our second and third node as well. Alright, so all three of my CVMs has the SCSI controller passed through already. What we're going to be doing now is we're going to be creating the Nutanix cluster. So here what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating the Nutanix cluster with all the three nodes that we have just installed with Nutanix Community Edition. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to SSH into one of the CVMs. Then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be following the command that Chris has. Let's open the text editor. So the -s is basically the IP addresses of all the controller VMs. DNS servers, NTP servers. I like to use Google's NTP server. Let's use it. And let's call this WSKN MGMT, and the external IP address would be the virtual IP of the cluster. And we can execute. So back to our session, and it's going to go ahead and create a cluster. So it'll take a couple of minutes, just hang in there. Okay, so we see the cluster has been successfully created. All right. What we can do is now we can launch browser to navigate to the virtual IP we set earlier. So this gives you the Prism login page. We need to log in with the default username and password. So it's admin and Nutanix/4u, no caps. And it will ask you to set up a new password. Then you can log in with your new password. So what you now need to do is you need to log into your Nutanix Next account with your username and password, if I can remember my username and password. So we can see that we have successfully deployed Nutanix Community Edition. 3 nodes under my hardware tab. I can see all the drives, which looks good, and the 3 individual hosts. So what we'll be doing next is carrying on the foundation of my non-GPU node as well as my GPU node. For this section, what we are going to be doing is we are going to be performing the installation of Community Edition on the remaining servers. So 1 ASUS server and 3 Dell servers. It's really the same process as what we did for the Lenovo servers, just that we've got a different UI when we're trying to select the boot device. So just feel free to skip right ahead if you are not interested in seeing this. So all 4 nodes have been successfully installed with Community Edition. What we are going to do in the next section is to create the cluster. What we're going to do right now is to go ahead and create the clusters. So we can open a terminal and SSH into CVM. So this is the ASUS server, and get the command to run. Then we do the same for the Dell clusters as well. And let's just wait for it to complete. Okay, both clusters are up now. So what we're going to be doing next is to deploy Prism Central on the management cluster. So in this section, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be upgrading all the clusters to the latest version of AOS. And let's head over into the LCM page for all the 3 clusters and kick off an LCM inventory task. That's going to enable auto inventory and auto NCC update as well. And just let it run. Okay, we see that the LCM has completed for the 3 clusters. So let's take a look. Yep. So we can return to inventory and see what are the software updates that we have. So I want to upgrade the OS to the latest available version, as well as AHV. Alright, then we'll just go ahead and kick off the upgrade. All right, so as we can see, all the 3 classes has been successfully updated to OS version 7.0.1.6, as well as AHV is 10.0.1.1. So the next step, what we're going to do is we're going to deploy Prism Central on the management cluster. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create a data services IP, right, for us to create iSCSI connections. So this is done. Save it. Then we'll head over to the VMs page, click on network configuration and create a new subnet. So I'll just call this MGMT primary, VLAN ID of 0, and I'll use IPAM. I don't have any DNS servers yet, so I'll just use 8.8.8.8. IP address pools will be something that I have prepared. And that's it. So the next step will be then to deploy Prism Central. So we can go over to the Home tab, register or create new Prism Central, click on Deploy, and I'll select Prism Central PC 7.3. Click on Next. I'll select an extra large one so that I can use all additional features like VPCs and whatnot. Next, select the subnet that I just create, give it the Google NTP servers, the default container, and I'll just rename this guy as Prism Central and give it an IP address. Once that is done, I'll just click on Deploy and it's going to deploy Prism Central in the background. It's going to download the Prism Central binaries, then perform the deployment. So as we can see here, the Prism Central deployment has completed. So what we want to do is we can log into Prism Central and change the default password to something that I want. So I think it's still loading, so we can wait for a while. While that is happening, we can log into the rest of the other classes and configure their data services IP. We will also configure. Okay, so let's refresh this page. Let's see whether we can get logged into Prism Central. I'll open up my management cluster Prism element first. Complete the EULA. Okay, great. So now what we can do is we can register the individual classes. Right, so let's register the management cluster, same for the GPU cluster and the non-GPU cluster. So in a couple of moments, we should see all the classes appear within Prism Central itself. Refresh the page. Yeah, the 3 classes are now available. Right, so this pretty much concludes reimaging all my servers and deploying Prism Central. So in the next videos, we'll be deploying the base infrastructure, things like Harbor Registry and all those good stuff. So I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.